Minister of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, the Honorable Dwight Sutherland, Senator Lynette Holder, Chief Executive Officer, Small Business Association, Mr. Anthony Bradshaw, Officer in Charge, Caribbean Export Development Agency, Mr. Patrick McCaskey, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, Ms. Sonia Foster, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of International Business and Industry, Mr. Wayne Willock, President, Small Business Association, and other members of the board, management and staff of the Small Business Association and the Caribbean Export Development Agency, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me say that in my capacity as President of the Caribbean Development Bank, I have several opportunities to speak at different fora, domestically, regionally, and internationally. But this invitation has been a very special one for me, I must confess, because for two reasons. One, I grew up in a family of small business people, so that I think I understand very, very clearly both the challenges, the highs and the lows of working in that sector. I also understand the promise and the potential of small business, so that it's very close to my heart, it's very personal. But one of the reasons I'm also pleased to be able to participate in your deliberations here today is because every mid-year, I have the responsibility of reporting to my shareholders on the performance of the institution that I have the privilege of leading. But I am also required to speak about the way forward for our institution, which requires us to have a look at the external environment within which we operate and the publics that we serve. One of the things that I did say in our meetings in Trinidad is that as I get older, as I come close to the ending of my career, I become more and more concerned about my region, my Caribbean region, and the prospects for our people. And many of our countries have been struggling with the issue of growth. And we've been trying to find the secret to unlock that growth. And I did make the point to my shareholders that in my humble judgment, the key to unlocking that growth, the key to us moving from 2% growth and less to 5% and above is the sector that you serve, this MSME sector, the dynamic force within our countries. The reason I say that to you is because I said to my shareholders that this is now the sector that we need to give close attention to as the leading financial development institution in the Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, much of what I intend to say this morning, unfortunately, has already been said. But, I spent a little bit of time trying to put my thoughts together, and I'm going to deliver, if you'll forgive me for repeating some of what we have heard. But the comforting aspect of that is that we seem to be all on the same wavelength. The issues are familiar to us. So let's talk about them. First of all, I want to start by thanking Senator Lynette Holder, the CEO of Barbados Small Business Association, for inviting me to deliver the keynote address at this year's State of the Sector Conference. I really appreciate it. I also want to congratulate the SBA for its continuing advocacy of micro, small, and medium-sized business across Barbados, and for organizing this important event here today. I encourage you to remain steadfast in your mission to provide effective representation and exemplary development services to and on behalf of micro, small, and medium enterprises nationally. and to continue to play a leadership role in elevating MSME issues on the local policy agenda. That's an important part of your remit. This conference is a perfect opportunity for all stakeholders here today to exchange ideas and widen your collective understanding of effective ways to catalyze MSME development in Barbados and the wider Caribbean region. By providing a platform for dialogue and exchange of information, fora like this one can deepen the partnership between the government, the Small Business Association, and the MSMEs themselves. I feel especially privileged to have been asked to address this forum on the topic, State of the MSME Sector in CARICOM, Prospects for the Future. This discussion is timely. In 2015, all CARICOM countries became signatories to the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. MSMEs are regarded as an important vehicle for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Through their significant job creation impact, MSMEs can play a pivotal role in reducing poverty and income inequality, mainly amongst women and youth. The Caribbean Development Bank shares the SBA's ambition to nurture and unleash the transformation potential of MSMEs and to create a strong, enabling business ecosystem. Importantly, we at the CDB are in the midst of preparing our strategic plan for the period 2020 to 2024. And the MSME sector is emerging as a critical area for strategic and focused attention in our region's ongoing efforts to achieve sustainable, inclusive economic growth and eliminate abject poverty and inequality. Based on our almost 50 years of experience working in 19 borrowing member countries, including here in Barbados, we have come to realize that MSMEs across our region share a similar history, similar experiences, similar challenges, and also similar prospects. Our intention, therefore, is to continue to craft programs of support that are available and accessible to all of our borrowing countries. As I indicated in my opening remarks, I must admit to my own personal and long-standing interest in MSMEs and their potential for contributing to economic growth and development, having myself grown up in a family whose livelihood was sustained by small business. My colleagues at the CDB can confirm that I consistently pour through the clippings of local, regional, and international newspapers and other publications in search of new information on MSMEs. The main objective is to broaden my own understanding of what strategies can galvanize the growth of the MSME sector in our neck of the woods, so to speak. Even as I thank you for offering me this platform, I also seek your forgiveness for taking the liberty of expanding the scope of my mandate to speak this morning on the state of MSMEs and their prospects, largely from a regional perspective. Interestingly, as I prepared for this event, I was reminded of the relative paucity of in-depth studies of the MSME sector in our part of the world, and hence the need for CDB to commission the study entitled Micro, Small, Medium Enterprise Development in the Caribbean Towards a New Frontier. That 2016 study examined MSMEs in 12 Caribbean countries. I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that there is considerable commonality in the structure, experience, and challenges facing MSMEs across our region. So too are the lessons which inform the appropriate policy responses for this group. This morning, I propose to draw 4 general conclusions. And I'm going to take them in turn. First, let me underscore the importance of MSMEs. Let us look at some of the facts. They are the backbone of the private sector, and they are the key drivers of economic growth and social inclusion right here in this beautiful country of Barbados. Their importance for this island's long-term growth and development is undeniable. According to a survey commissioned by the Small Business Association in 2016, MSMEs in Barbados accounted for approximately 92% of formal enterprises and over 60% of private sector employment. Some of our earlier speakers, I think, cited these numbers. The bulk of these jobs was in small service companies, which were responsible for 34% of private sector employment. MSMEs also accounted for 39% of total exports. That's why we also need to talk about the broader business environment outside of the borders of Barbados. In addition, 34% of enterprises had women as the largest owner, while 6% had equal male and female ownership. Now, we at the Caribbean Development Bank, part of our mandate is to ensure that there's gender equity in the projects and the interventions that we undertake. So the reference to the role of women is not only good for all of us, but it is good for the fulfillment of the mandate of the institution that I serve. Based on findings published in CARICOM's 2016 Regional MSME Policy and reconfirmed in the CDB Finance Study, the situation in Barbados is very typical of the rest of the region. On average, MSMEs contribute 50% of GDP and create 45% of the jobs in our region. But their full potential remains unrealized. MSMEs can do so much better. What is the basis for me arriving at that conclusion? If MSMEs account for such a significant proportion of enterprises and provide the bulk of employment, should we not also expect them to make a bigger contribution to Barbados's exports? Certainly, if our MSMEs are operating efficiently, then it would be reasonable to assume that they are competitive and have the potential to export. Therefore, we have to figure out how to unravel those issues that are preventing them from operating more efficiently, more productively, and more competitively. If we understand those constraints, we can design workable solutions to unleash this potential and create a business environment in which MSMEs can grow and flourish in a well-functioning market economy. Because of the size of its contribution to GDP, the performance of the MSME sector is generally a good barometer of the state of the wider economy. Further, because our countries are small and open, there is a strong nexus between our ability to trade and the economic growth performance of our countries. So this business of looking inwardly is not going to work for us because we're too small, we need to earn foreign exchange, and therefore we need to be engaged in trading activity outside of our borders. So we have to first come to grips with the issues that are affecting MSMEs before our region can expect to overcome the challenges of low growth, weak trade and investment, and persistently high poverty and inequality. The issues which are constraining MSMEs from realizing their full potential are generally well known. A weak enabling environment, high energy and production costs, limited and poor product or service quality and standards, and limited access to both loan and equity finance are the principal limiting factors in my judgment. Which brings me to my second general conclusion this morning. If we accept these limiting factors, then those of us who are charged with policy making must be resolute in our advocacy for giving high priority to creating a business-friendly environment within which our MSMEs can develop. The World Bank's Doing Business surveys benchmark all countries which participate in the yearly exercise against the regulations that affect business performance. In the most recent survey of 190 countries, Barbados ranked 129, and the average for the Caribbean was 126, suggesting that relative to other countries, much work remains to be done to create an environment which is good for business. In many Caribbean countries, there is ample evidence of inadequate legislative and regulatory frameworks, weak public sector institutions for providing legal protection, and inefficient business support and training services. In some of our countries, for example, property registration continues to be time-consuming and expensive because property rights are not adequately defined or protected. Bankruptcy laws are often excessively punitive and serve penalties, and severe penalties, can confound the willingness to invest in new business ventures. Better enforcement of copyright, patents, and trademarks is required for businesses to be protected and to avoid litigation and copyright infringement. Then our region suffers from prolonged delays in implementing agreements reached under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. This is one of my pet peeves these days. Several issues require urgent attention. For example, market access has not improved, despite the removal of over 450 legal and administrative barriers to the free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor in most CARICOM countries. The establishment of a single jurisdiction to allow for the equal treatment of business entities across CARICOM is still outstanding. And a CARICOM business must still register in every jurisdiction in which it wishes to operate. And alien landholding licensing requirements are still in place. Then, most of the 12 participating CSME countries have failed to enact the requisite legislation that would allow the free movement of even the 10 categories of persons that now have the right to seek employment in other CARICOM member states without the need for a work permit. These are restrictions which add to the cost and the slow pace of doing business and hamper the extent to which some Caribbean businesses can penetrate regional markets. In the past 15 months, there has been a renewed focus on the CSME. I, ladies and gentlemen, remain optimistic that accelerated interest in honoring treaty obligations will follow shortly. I say no more on that point. Our governments must remain committed to improving the business environment and scale up their efforts to create a policy and institutional framework that responds appropriately to the characteristics and special needs of MSMEs. Are the tax regimes and regulatory requirements making compliance costs too burdensome? Or are they incentivizing SMEs to remain in the informal sector? In my view, priority must be given to cutting red tape, increasing the transparency and cost efficiency of regulations, collecting data on a systematic basis, and adopting stronger evidence-based policies. During the recent budget presentation earlier this year, Prime Minister Motley gave notice of her government's intention to utilize technology to enhance the quality and speed of delivering services via online platforms for clearing imports, submitting planning and development applications, reviewing driver's licenses, obtaining police certificates of character, paying taxes, and so on and so forth. These measures are encouraging enhancements of the business ecosystem, and we give plaudits to the government of Barbados for moving in this direction. We want to see it happen all across our Caribbean space. My third comment this morning directs attention to the difficulty that MSMEs face in accessing appropriate financing. We all want to hear about this. Because they drive economic growth and job creation, MSMEs can be one of our most potent weapons in the fight against unemployment, poverty, and social exclusion. But to play this role effectively, the conditions must also be ripe for them to grow and flourish. We have to give highest priority to creating that ecosystem in which MSMEs become more willing to embrace uncertainty and to take risks. Key to creating this environment is access to finance and access to financial services. Limited access to credit, the paucity of venture capital, the minister spoke to this and I was very happy to hear it, and the generally underdeveloped nature of our region's capital markets are troublesome constraints facing MSMEs in Barbados and the rest of our Caribbean. The issue is not simply that funds are unavailable. In fact, even in situations where the financial system is reporting high levels of liquidity, MSMEs struggle to access resources from the banking system at acceptable interest rates. If I can just quote you some figures, speaking from memory. Right here in Barbados, I believe the latest figures suggest that there are about 9 billion Barbados dollars of liquidity in the formal banking system. In my own country, Jamaica, I saw a statistic the other day that said in the non-bank financial sector, that's insurance companies and what have you, there's liquidity of about 1 trillion Jamaican dollars. You know the Jamaican dollar is not 2 to 1, but even at their rate of exchange, that is plenty money. There's no shortage of money. There's no shortage of liquidity in most of our countries. Diagnostic studies which were conducted by the Inter-American Development Bank reveal that only 3 to 5% of Caribbean micro-entrepreneurs have access to financing. Ladies and gentlemen, can you believe that? 3 to 5% of micro-entrepreneurs have access to financing. Indeed, financial institutions are generally reluctant to lend to MSMEs because they lack adequate collateral, they operate in unfavorable business environments, or they have limited access to affordable accounting, legal, auditing, and other support services. According to the same study, MSMEs prefer informal modes of credit, which are relatively easy and relatively cheaper to secure. As a result, the uptake of microcredit has lagged behind expectations. This suggests that the mainstream financial system, working collaboratively with government and the business community, may need to consider redesigning their products and offering special mechanisms for enhanced MSME access. Let's talk a little bit about some of the mechanisms which could be used. First, we're speaking about credit bureau to facilitate the lending institution's assessment of creditworthiness. Secondly, collateral registries to restrict the possibility of fraudulent reuse of collateral. Guarantee schemes to reduce the risk spread in the pricing of MSME loans by sharing the risk with the retail lenders. And fourthly, additional financing channels such as equity funds, angel investor networks, and junior stock exchanges. The minister referred to the situation in Jamaica, and I'll return to that anon. Let me make special mention of junior stock exchanges as a financing modality to promote the use of equity financing by MSMEs. Junior markets can be found here in Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. Jamaica, with the incentive of 10-year tax holidays for listing, has perhaps the most active stock exchange. Important lessons can be learned from the experiences of these 3 junior markets. One lesson for these countries without junior exchanges is that the legal reforms which encourage MSMEs to raise equity financing by listing their companies on junior markets must be implemented to facilitate growth and expansion of small businesses. I strongly recommend that MSMEs formalize their businesses by keeping proper accounting records and adopting sound business practices. The greatest inhibitor to accessing finance, global competitiveness, or even growth is the failure to adopt good business practices. MSMEs should also register to be members of business support organizations. Across Europe, this is mandatory when registering a business. These organizations, similar to the SBA, lobby on behalf of their members, bring sector issues to the table, and represent their interests in policy discussions. BSOs are also key in capacity building, in public-private partnership engagements, and making links in new markets. My 4th point is with respect to changing the business culture and the mindset. The biggest mistake that a small business can make is to think like a small business. I'm not sure to whom I should credit this quote, not me certainly, but it describes succinctly the mindset needed for successful MSMEs and should be included alongside effective business planning, good financial management, continuous marketing, and excellent customer service. MSMEs are simply the incubators for most large businesses. So you must be able to visualize the company having the DNA of an elephant, as the distinguished Barbadian management consultant and newspaper columnist, Dr. Basil Springer, would characterize it. Such a company would be capable of operating outside the narrow geographical confines of Barbados. With increased trade, we can expect more jobs, higher growth, and increased prosperity. Thinking big will open up new opportunities for MSMEs to compete on the international market by becoming part of a regional value chain. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme for this conference, small size, big thinking, changing the mindset for global engagement, says it well. The attractiveness of this strategy is substantiated by the achievements of several large, medium, and small Caribbean enterprises which have grown their business by moving cross-border to other regional and international markets. Companies like these become large by embracing behaviors and practices that engender superior levels of productivity, efficiency, and cost-effectiveness. The regional market alone gives MSMEs immediate access to just over 18 million consumers under the CSME arrangement. If you want encouragement to undertake some of these reforms, that should whet your appetite. Firms which are incapable of competing in the local and/or regional markets and do not employ good international business practices will not graduate to the world stage. With duty and quota-free access for most of our goods and services under the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, the European Union still offers a relatively protected market for regional MSMEs to hone their competitiveness skills prior to venturing onto the wider, unprotected world market. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said quite a bit this morning about what needs to be done in the ecosystem to support MSMEs in our region. It would be remiss of me to discuss the development role and impact of MSMEs without mentioning the role of my own institution. So before I close, let me quickly recap CDB's own contribution to supporting MSME development and what we plan to do going forward. Our strategic posture is informed by three general principles. CDB's operations should increase the flow of capital into BMCs for the benefit of MSMEs. That is where we focus. We should use our interventions to enhance financial intermediation and develop regional and sub-regional capital markets. And C, CDB should cooperate and build alliances with other financial institutions, including multilateral institutions, to increase the overall impact of assistance to MSMEs. Within this operating framework, since 2015, we have committed $30 million US and disbursed $20 million US to over 900 firms for private sector development. Going forward, our focus is on ramping up our engagement with the Barbadian and Caribbean-wide private sector whilst maintaining the high credit quality of CDB's banking function. There is scope and need for CDB to continue to intermediate funding to MSMEs through public and privately owned financial institutions. However, careful attention will have to be made to the pricing of our funding through the privately owned institutions, in particular, to ensure that their on-lending rates are competitive for your sector. We are determined to increase our involvement with MSMEs and to play an even bigger role in unleashing their potential. In this regard, we have embarked on some innovative approaches to attract additional financial flows for our MSME program. In 2018, for example, we launched the Multi-Donor Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund, or CIF, with startup capital of $2.6 million US, and there's more to come. There is no shortage of demand for CIF, which provides grants and technical assistance to MSMEs in order to encourage innovation and job creation in the creative industries. Our most recent proposal is to mobilize additional financing which can be used to de-risk lending to MSMEs by providing partial credit guarantees to established financial institutions. In other words, we're going to share the risk. We're going to de-risk the banks that have the liquidity because we want to encourage them to lend to your enterprises because you are the dynamic sector. Additional technical assistance will be offered to assist MSMEs in bolstering their creditworthiness by developing suitable marketing and business plans and ensuring that proper accounting systems are in place. This initiative is to be executed through the Caribbean Consultancy Technological Services, CTCS as we call it, which is our main mechanism for delivering professional services to MSMEs. It is a small program of direct technical assistance, workshops, and training attachments, but it delivers big results with huge impact. Sometimes one of our failings in the Caribbean Development Bank is some of the products that we have, we don't advertise them enough. So many of you probably have never even heard about CTCS. But CTCS predates me, and I've been in the bank for almost 20 years. So that program is going to get much greater level of funding. It is going to get much greater level of impact, and you're going to hear much more about it. In closing, I wish to point out that the current business environment, while still being difficult because of weak global growth, has presented us with a window of opportunity in the form of increased funding for MSMEs. CDB remains committed to supporting the development of that sector in Barbados and in the rest of our region. We're giving high priority to financing and promoting initiatives that enhance competitiveness. And we are relying on institutions like the Small Business Association to help us to design programs that are better targeted for MSMEs to drive economic growth and employment creation in Barbados and the wider Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you very much for your time and for your invitation.